My husband told me he was going to Germany for a year to work on a major bridge construction project. I secretly tracked his location through his phone and found him in a VIP maternity ward, tending to his pregnant young mistress. I went back, sold our $3.5 million waterfront mansion, abandoned my paralyzed mother-in-law, and left the state. A year later, when my husband brought his mistress and their baby to the house, he was absolutely stunned by what he found. A light drizzle fell outside the Seattle-Tacoma International Airport, wrapping everything in a gray, dreary mist that perfectly matched my mood. The indifferent voice of the announcer, calling out flight boarding times, blended with the hurried footsteps of people rushing back and forth. Andrew stood across from me, adjusting the collar of his trench coat. His handsome face showed determination, but a look of sorrow lingered in his eyes. He took my hand, the warm hand I had trustingly held for the last 8 years, and spoke in his deep, velvety voice. "Just bear with it for a year, honey. This trip is for our future, for our whole family. The bridge project in Frankfurt is incredibly important. When I finish it, I'll have a real shot at becoming the regional director. Then we will never have to worry about money again." I forced a smile, holding back the tears threatening to spill from my eyes, and straightened his lapel. In our 12 years together, from the days we started with nothing to our current comfortable life, we had never been apart for this long. Andrew pulled a debit card from his leather wallet, placed it in my hand, and carefully instructed me. "There is $50,000 on this. The PIN is our wedding anniversary. Use it for your needs, medical supplies for my mom, and household expenses. Mom is paralyzed on one side now, and her mood swings can be unpredictable. Just be patient with her, please. There is a big time difference, but I'll try to call as often as I can." I nodded, gripping the plastic card in my hand as if clinging to his promise. "Don't worry, just focus on your work. I'll handle everything at home. Your mother is my mother too. I'll take good care of her." Andrew pressed a gentle kiss to my forehead. It was rushed, but it was enough to make my heart ache. He turned and walked toward the security checkpoint. His tall figure gradually vanished into the bustling crowd. I stood rooted to the spot for a long time, staring at the departure board, silently praying for his safety in a foreign land. That night, I returned to our spacious waterfront estate on Lake Washington, which suddenly felt terrifyingly empty and quiet. The sound of raindrops tapping against the roof felt like the night itself was sighing. This house was once our greatest pride, the result of all our sweat and tears during our younger years. Now, without its master, it felt vast and unusually cold. My mother-in-law, Martha, was asleep in the first-floor guest bedroom. Her steady snoring was interrupted by occasional groans from joint pain. 3 months ago, she had suffered a massive stroke that paralyzed the left side of her body. Her entire life now depended on me and a visiting home care nurse. Seeing her tossing and turning, unable to settle, I wanted to play some classic country music for her, as I usually did. I remembered an old iPad Andrew had left at home so his mother could read the news and stay entertained. I rummaged through the living room console table. The tablet was fully charged. Swiping to unlock the screen, I was about to open YouTube, but my finger accidentally tapped the Find My app with its green radar icon. Andrew and I shared an iCloud account from our early days together to sync photos and contacts. We never bothered changing it because we trusted each other completely. A map loaded on the screen. A blue dot, representing the tablet, pulsed at our home address, while a green dot represented Andrew's iPhone. Logically, Andrew should have been on his flight by now, his phone either off or in airplane mode, meaning his location should not be updating, or it should show his last ping at the international terminal. But no, the green dot was still glowing, and it was nowhere near the airport or international airspace. My heart skipped a beat, and a cold chill ran down my spine. I rubbed my eyes and zoomed in on the map, telling myself it had to be a GPS glitch or a bad signal. But no matter how many times I refreshed the page, that green dot stubbornly remained in the exact same spot, about 25 miles from our house. It was a newly developed, upscale suburb just outside the city. More specifically, the pin dropped right on top of a highly renowned, ultra-expensive private maternity center. Flight 1348, as the departure board had shown, had already taken off, carrying my longing and hopes for my husband building our future in Europe. But my husband, who was supposed to be on that transatlantic flight, was transmitting a signal from a local delivery ward. I sat motionless on the living room sofa all night, gripping the iPad so tightly my knuckles turned white. Outside, the rain continued its monotonous rhythm, and the wind howling through the window sills sounded like fate mocking me. Had I made a mistake? Was it a satellite error? A tech glitch? Or had my entire life just derailed? Thousands of excuses for my husband raced through my mind. Maybe he left a device in a friend's car. Maybe he missed his flight due to an emergency. But female intuition, that terrifying gut feeling I always tried to suppress, screamed a different, cruel truth. The next morning, I woke up with dark circles under my eyes and a splitting headache. I had spent the night in a restless half-sleep, constantly opening the tablet to check the location. But the green dot vanished around 2 in the morning, leaving a massive question mark in my soul. Just as I stepped down into the kitchen, my phone vibrated with an iMessage from Andrew. A short line appeared on the screen. Landed in Frankfurt. Everything is fine. Miss you, honey. Isn't freezing here and the signal is terrible. Heading to the hotel to rest. Will call you later. Love you. Attached was a photo of a steaming cup of coffee on a wooden table, with a foggy landscape and a glimpse of a cobblestone street out the window. Any other day, I would have smiled, felt a wave of relief, and typed out a loving reply. But today, staring at that photo, all I saw was a meticulously staged lie. I zoomed in on the image as much as possible, scrutinizing every single detail. In the reflection of the glass coffee cup, I noticed the blurry image of a standard American flat-prong electrical outlet. Those outlets are standard in the United States, not in Germany, where they exclusively use round, recessed European plugs. He played his part so well, carefully setting up props to deceive his loyal wife, but he failed on the smallest detail. I swallowed a heavy sigh, shoved the phone into my apron pocket, and carried a bowl of warm oatmeal upstairs to my mother-in-law. Martha was already awake, lying on her side watching morning television. Seeing me, she scowled and snapped at me. What took you so long? Do you want an old woman to starve to death? Move faster. Isn't time for my medication. I carefully placed the bowl on her bedside table, helped her sit up against the pillows, and tried to keep my voice steady. I cooked the oats a bit longer so they would be softer and easier for you to swallow. How did you sleep last night? Martha scoffed and glared at me from the corner of her eye. What sleep? My whole body aches. My Andrew is working himself to the bone to keep this house running, and you just walk around with a sour look on your face like you are at a funeral. Take proper care of me so he can work in peace. I scooped up a spoonful of oatmeal, blew on it, and brought it to her mouth. While she chewed, I asked as casually as I could, Mom, Andrew is away for such a long time, and I'm worried. Do you happen to have the number of anyone on his project team so I can check on how he is doing? Martha suddenly froze mid-swallow. Her eyes darted around, completely avoiding my gaze, and then she yelled at me. You are so weird. Where did your husband go? What is he doing? You should know better than anyone. Why are you asking me? He went to do important work. Don't bother him and distract him. You better go buy me some more of those expensive organic vitamins. The last batch did absolutely nothing. Her evasiveness and unusually defensive reaction only fueled my suspicions. She definitely knew something, but she was either hiding it from me or, worse, covering for her son. After lunch, I called the home care nurse and asked her to come watch Martha for the afternoon, telling her I needed to go to church to pray for Andrew's safe travels. Hearing that I was going to pray for her son, Martha immediately softened and stopped her complaining. I got into my old Honda Civic, the same car I had driven since my college days, and merged onto the highway. The weather was still overcast, the damp air sticking uncomfortably to my skin. I drove purely from memory, navigating toward yesterday's GPS ping, straight to the upscale suburban medical district. Arriving, I parked my old sedan in a public parking garage and walked onto the grounds of the elite maternity clinic. It was a place designed for the wealthy, featuring luxurious landscaping that resembled a 5-star resort. I wandered through the visitor parking lot. My eyes frantically searched for the one thing I simultaneously wanted and dreaded to see. And there, tucked away in a secluded corner under a row of flowering dogwood trees, something squeezed my heart into a tight fist. Sitting perfectly parked was a gleaming black Range Rover with the familiar vanity plate VIP 888. It was the exact vehicle Andrew treated like royalty, the car he claimed he was leaving in his best friend Dave's secure garage for the entire year he would be away. He had told me that if a car sat idle for too long, the engine would degrade, so Dave was going to start it occasionally. What a pathetic lie. I stepped closer and touched the hood. The cold metal transferred a chill through my skin, making me shiver. On the passenger seat, I spotted a pink velvet neck pillow shaped like a cat. It was a childish, cutesy item Andrew would never buy for me, and he certainly would never use it himself. It turned out the flight to Frankfurt was nothing but a clumsy theatrical performance, and my husband had not traveled far at all. He was right here, incredibly close, yet entirely in a different world I knew nothing about. The cold wind sweeping through the parking lot chilled me to the bone, even though I wore a thick coat. I pulled the brim of my baseball cap down low and adjusted my blue medical mask, covering almost my entire face, leaving only my bloodshot, sleep-deprived eyes visible. I walked through the rows of luxury vehicles, the squeak of my sneakers against the concrete echoing sharply in my ears. The elevator for the VIP wing lit up. I squeezed inside alongside a group of nurses, pushing a medication cart, making myself as small and unnoticeable as possible so no one would question my out-of-place presence. The red number 3 blinked and stopped. The elevator doors slid open, and a light, luxurious scent of lemongrass hit my nose, completely unlike the harsh, sterile smell of bleach in normal hospitals. The hallway of the VIP wing was lined with deep crimson plush carpet, quiet and deserted to the point where I could hear the frantic pounding of my own heart. Relying on the exact pinpoint from the GPS map, I tiptoed towards Suite 305 at the very end of the corridor. The door to the suite was left slightly ajar, a sliver of warm light spilling into the hallway along with the faint, muffled sounds of a reality TV show. Holding my breath, I pressed my back against the cold wall and peeked through the narrow crack. What I saw inside was like a sharp, merciless blade plunging directly into my trembling heart, shredding every ounce of faith and hope I had ever held. Reclining on a pristine white hospital bed, propped up by thick pillows, was a young woman with long, voluminous blonde curls. Her plump, rosy face glowed with satisfaction. She wore a set of expensive pink silk pajamas, and her heavily rounded pregnant belly was clearly visible beneath the smooth fabric. Sitting right beside her on a plush armchair was Andrew. My husband, the man who had hugged me at the airport just yesterday swearing to build a brighter future in Europe, was carefully peeling an apple. His movements were remarkably gentle and patient. In all 12 years of our life together, I had never once seen him do anything remotely like that for me. He brought a slice of apple directly to her lips, gazing at her with absolute tenderness and adoration. It was the exact same warm, loving look I genuinely believed was reserved only for me on our wedding day. The girl playfully pushed his hand away. Her voice was dripping with sugary sweetness. "I don't want an apple. I want baked salmon with asparagus. Are you sure you can just leave like this? Did that old hag at home suspect anything? What if she finds out you are not in Germany, but here with me and our baby?" Andrew laughed. His familiar, deep chuckle now sounded incredibly fake and grated against my ears. He set the plate of apples down, affectionately stroked her hair, and spoke with utter contempt. "Don't worry about her. She is clueless. She does whatever I tell her." I handed her a debit card with $50,000, and her eyes lit up. Right now, she is probably buried up to her neck taking care of my old mother. Where would she find the time to spy on me? You just focus on resting and taking care of yourself. This little guy is my true heir. He is the most important thing in the world. I stood frozen outside the door, clamping my hands tightly over my mouth to keep from sobbing out loud. It turned out that in his eyes, I was nothing but a clueless old hag, a high-class maid paid off with the very money I had helped him earn. I remembered how I had budgeted our groceries and clothes, never daring to buy myself a decent lipstick, saving every single penny so he could start his construction firm, so he could achieve the success he flaunted today. And now, he was using my sacrifices to fund a secret life, keeping another woman and the child I had dreamed of my entire life but was never able to give him. Olivia. I read the name printed on the patient chart hanging by the door. "You promised me," she whined, narrowing her eyes and rubbing her pregnant belly. "As soon as I give birth, you will officially bring us home. I don't want to be the secret mistress forever. My son needs a real father." Andrew leaned over and kissed her forehead. His voice was firm and reassuring. "Of course, my love. Just wait until I get her to sign over the deed to that massive ranch land her parents left her, and then I'll throw her out on the street. Then that waterfront estate will be all ours. You can remodel it however you want." Every word they spoke felt like a sledgehammer smashing into my skull, shattering the last remaining pieces of my sanity. I wanted to kick the door open, scratch his face, and scream so the whole world would see the true, vile nature of this man. But my feet felt rooted to the plush carpet. I could not move an inch. I caught my reflection in the dark glass of the hallway window. A woman in her 30s, dressed in faded clothes, with heavy dark circles under her eyes from sheer exhaustion, Compared to the blooming youthful mistress inside, I looked like a complete failure. Strangely enough, I was not crying. Standing witness to a scene where my husband was doting on another woman, I did not shed a single tear. I only felt an overwhelming sense of disgust. Nausea rose sharply in my throat. It turned out the plane ticket to Germany was a one-way ticket from a paradise of lies straight into a living hell, where human cruelty was colder than ice. I turned around and walked briskly toward the elevator, leaving behind the slightly ajar door of Suite 305, which hid the filthy secrets of a marriage rotted from the inside out. I drove out of the hospital parking lot. My hands were still shaking violently, but my mind began to clear with terrifying speed. I did not go straight home. Instead, I pulled into a quiet, dimly lit coffee shop down a narrow side street, picking a table in the darkest corner. I pulled out my phone and dialed Max. He was my best friend from college. Now, he was the owner of a highly successful private investigation and cybersecurity firm in downtown Seattle. Hearing my cracked, trembling voice, Max did not ask a lot of unnecessary questions. He just told me to send him the GPS coordinates and any basic information I had, and he would get on it immediately. I texted him the license plate number, Andrew's phone number, and the exact address of the hospital I had just fled. Deep down, a tiny, foolish part of me still hoped everything I had just witnessed was just a vivid nightmare. Late that afternoon, as I sat blankly watching drops of black coffee drip to the bottom of my mug, my phone vibrated with a new email notification. The subject line was brief. Case File 1. Urgent. Sender. Max. I took a deep, shaky breath. My trembling finger tapped the screen. The encrypted attachment downloaded in seconds. Before my eyes unfolded a series of photographs and detailed background checks that made my blood run cold. This was not just a brief affair. Andrew had constructed an entirely separate life, a complete second family right behind my back. And it had been going on for a long time. According to Max's background check, Andrew had been leasing a luxury penthouse for Olivia in the city's most exclusive high-rise for 2 whole years. It was the exact same luxury building I had once begged him to move into because of the excellent security and beautiful rooftop gardens. But Andrew had dismissed the idea entirely, claiming the HOA fees were extortionate and a massive waste of cash. It turned out he did not mind wasting cash. He just did not want to spend a dime of it on me. The lease agreement was legally under Andrew's name, locked in for 5 years, paid up front every 6 months. Attached to the report were bank statements from a hidden account I never even knew existed. On the 15th of every single month, Andrew consistently transferred $5,000 into Olivia's account, labeled as living expenses. That number danced mockingly in front of my eyes, taunting the $50,000 he had left me to run an entire household for a whole year. With me, he scrutinized every grocery receipt and every bottle of medicine for his mother, but on his mistress, he hemorrhaged money without a second thought. I scrolled down to the surveillance photos taken by Max's team. They showed Andrew in casual shorts and a t-shirt, carrying a shopping basket next to Olivia at a high-end organic grocery store near her building. He was laughing brightly, pointing at the fresh produce section, looking like the picture-perfect relaxed family man enjoying simple domestic bliss. In another photo, they were picking out baby clothes at a premium maternity boutique. Andrew was holding up a pair of tiny sneakers, his eyes sparkling with absolute joy. In yet another shot, he was kneeling on the sidewalk, tying Olivia's shoelaces because her massive pregnant belly made it too hard for her to bend down. Such an incredibly thoughtful, caring gesture. Meanwhile, when I badly sprained my ankle last winter, and it swelled up like a balloon, he just tossed a tube of muscle rub on the bed and told me to massage it myself. All those countless evenings when he claimed he was stuck late at the office, flying out for business trips, or entertaining demanding clients until midnight, were actually days he was returning to that luxury condo, where a hot dinner and a beautiful, youthful mistress were waiting for him. I slammed my laptop shut, feeling as though all the oxygen had been violently sucked from my lungs. This betrayal was not just physical, it had invaded my soul and poisoned every single corner of my existence. He had deceived me systematically, with calculated cruelty. For 2 entire years, I remembered how I constantly budgeted, denying myself everything just to buy him an expensive tailored suit, while I wore the same old sweaters season after season. I remembered the sleepless nights I spent worrying about his health during his supposed exhausting work trips, terrified he was not eating well. All my devotion and extreme sacrifices had now been reduced to a total joke, to a level of stupidity that bordered on pathetic. My phone rang again, snapping me out of my bitter thoughts. It was Max. His voice sounded hesitant and deeply concerned. Kate, I just sent you a second file. This one is way more important. I dug into Andrew's financial transaction history and hacked some of his encrypted work emails. You need to brace yourself. This is not just a simple cheating case. This involves serious legal fraud and your personal assets. I gripped the phone so hard my hand cramped. My voice came out cold and hard. Send it. I can handle it. After seeing all of this, what else could possibly hurt me? But I was dead wrong. The depths of human depravity went far beyond anything my mind could have ever imagined. And what I was about to learn was infinitely more terrifying than simply sharing my husband with another woman. That night, I returned home just as the grandfather clock chimed midnight. The waterfront estate was plunged into total darkness. Only a faint yellowish glow from a nightlight seeped out from under my mother-in-law's door. Martha was sleeping soundly. Her rhythmic snores echoed in the dead silence. I tiptoed up the grand staircase and headed straight into Andrew's home office. Usually, he strictly forbade me from entering under the guise of protecting confidential client data. But now, while he was sleeping sweetly beside his mistress, this forbidden door was wide open to me. I booted up his desktop computer. A password prompt blocked the screen. In the past, his password was always the date of our wedding anniversary, but I knew that when a person changes, their numbers change too. I tried entering Olivia's birth date, which I had just memorized from the private investigator's file. Incorrect password. I tried again. This time, I used the projected due date of their unborn child, and then a few other numbers tied to their secret love nest. I remembered the license plate of his Range Rover, 888. Still incorrect. Suddenly, the image of his eyes, the way he looked at Olivia in the hospital, flashed in my mind. The blind, obsessed look of a man completely infatuated. I tried typing her name combined with a phrase, Olivia, my love. The screen instantly flashed brightly, and the Windows desktop loaded, welcoming me into the highly classified world of my model husband. My heart pounded so violently it felt like it would burst through my ribcage. I did not waste time browsing casual photos or chat logs. Following Max's exact technical instructions, I navigated to hidden directories disguised with boring system names, buried deep inside the hard drive. Earlier that afternoon, Max had cleverly embedded a tiny spyware program inside a fake promotional email he sent to Andrew's business account, which now granted me a backdoor key to bypass the file encryption. And what I discovered made me physically stagger. I had to grab the edge of the mahogany desk to keep from collapsing to the floor. These were not just receipts for keeping a mistress. This was a massive, complex web of extremely shady, high-risk financial schemes. Andrew had been day trading highly volatile cryptocurrency and placing massive, illegal sports bets through offshore syndicates. Rows of red text indicating bank transfers, negative balances in the hundreds of thousands, even millions of dollars, completely covered an Excel spreadsheet tracking his mounting debts. It turned out his brilliant, highly successful executive persona was nothing but an empty, rotting shell, hiding a degenerate gambler teetering on the very edge of total bankruptcy. He had suffered catastrophic losses and was drowning in debt to loan sharks and dangerous criminal organizations. But what completely paralyzed me with shock was not the sheer size of his debt, but how he had desperately attempted to pay it off. I found a scanned copy of a collateral loan agreement placed on a modest apartment downtown. It was my own personal property, bought with my savings long before we ever got married, which I currently rented out to tenants. On the loan contract for $200,000 from some shady, unlicensed finance firm, sat my signature. It was a flawless forgery, capturing the exact soft, elegant curves of my handwriting, 99% identical to my real signature. He had forged my signature and a fake power of attorney to mortgage the property I had earned with my own blood and sweat, tossing it into the bottomless pit of his gambling debts. I scrolled further down. Freezing sweat soaked right through my shirt. There were email chains with a sleazy corporate lawyer discussing the systematic embezzlement of his own company's assets. He was secretly transferring working capital, expensive heavy machinery, and highly lucrative construction contracts into a brand new shell corporation. The sole registered owner of this new shadow company was none other than Olivia. He was actively bleeding our joint company dry, turning it into an empty husk loaded with massive corporate tax liabilities. And he was setting it up to shift the entire legal and criminal responsibility onto me, since my name was officially listed on paper as the vice president. "You animal! You absolute animal!" I hissed through gritted teeth, as tears of pure, blinding rage streamed from my eyes. It turned out this fake trip to Germany was not just a romantic getaway with his pregnant mistress, but a highly calculated move to hide from the violent creditors who were already hunting him down, while simultaneously creating a rock-solid alibi for when the company officially imploded. He had meticulously plotted everything, pushing his own wife onto a path that would lead straight to federal prison and insurmountable debt, while he planned to live out his days in luxury with his mistress and the stolen millions. The following morning, I woke up much earlier than usual, keeping my face perfectly composed, as if I remained blissfully ignorant of the horrifying secrets unearthed in the dark of night. I had scheduled an appointment with Dr. Evans, our longtime family physician who had managed our family's health for years, asking him to come to the house for a routine checkup on my mother-in-law. Dr. Evans was generally a polite man, but he was inherently cowardly and terrified of legal trouble. I tactfully dropped a hint about conducting a full audit of my family assets and raised questions about unusually high medical expenses, which immediately made him visibly nervous. While he was checking Martha's blood pressure in her room, I invited him into the living room for a cup of coffee and slid a thick manila envelope onto the coffee table. Inside was a printed screenshot of text messages proving he had accepted illegal cash kickbacks from Andrew in exchange for prescribing overly expensive medications. Dr. Evans, I know you are generally a decent man, but my husband Andrew has been acting incredibly strange lately. My mother-in-law has become extremely lethargic, constantly drifting in and out of consciousness. Her cognitive health is deteriorating rapidly. I highly suspect there is something fundamentally wrong with the medications you are prescribing her, I said slowly, locking my eyes intensely onto his. The older doctor immediately broke out in a cold sweat. His hands shook violently as he held his coffee mug, and he stammered, "Catherine, I was strictly following Andrew's explicit instructions. He told me she was suffering from severe insomnia. He said she cried constantly through the night, and she desperately needed a much stronger sedative so she could sleep peacefully and let you both work without interruption." "A stronger sedative?" I sneered. "Strong enough to turn a sharp, alert elderly woman into a mindless vegetable? You do realize that if the medical board finds out about this, you will permanently lose your medical license and go straight to federal prison as an accomplice to criminal poisoning." Dr. Evans's face drained of all color, turning as white as a sheet. He frantically confessed that Andrew had heavily pressured him into writing off-label prescriptions for highly potent psychotropic tranquilizers, drugs strictly blacklisted for long-term use in elderly patients due to the severe risk of memory loss and chemical dependency. After seeing the terrified doctor to the door with a promise that I would thoroughly review his files, I walked back into Martha's bedroom. She was still lying there in a drug-induced daze, her eyes shut tight, her dry lips muttering incoherent nonsense. I gently lifted her head to adjust her pillows. My hand suddenly brushed against something hard and plastic hidden deep inside the pillowcase padding. I shoved my hand further in and pulled out a sterile white prescription bottle with the label completely ripped off. Inside were dozens of pale blue pills. This was the exact medication Andrew had secretly handed over to the home care nurse, explicitly ordering her to crush it up and mix it into Martha's warm milk every single night. I stared at the plastic bottle in my hand. A massive wave of pity, completely eclipsed by pure fury, rose in my chest. Andrew being exceptionally cruel to his wife was one thing, but he did not even spare his own flesh and blood, the very mother who had given birth to him and raised him. He had intentionally turned his own mother into a heavily sedated prop, a massive, fabricated burden designed to chain me to this house, forcing me to drown in caretaking duties, so I would never have the time or energy to uncover his criminal activities. Right at that moment, Martha shifted on the bed. Her cloudy, unfocused eyes slowly fluttered open. Perhaps because I had deliberately skipped giving her the tainted milk that morning, she was slightly more lucid than usual. She immediately spotted the white pill bottle in my hand. A flash of genuine panic crossed her eyes, which quickly morphed into defensive anger. She struggled to prop herself up. Her voice was raspy but aggressively clear. "Give that back. Hand it over right now. Those are the special vitamins my Andrew bought for me. Are you trying to steal them from me?" I stared down at her with a bitter, hollow look. "Mom, these are not vitamins. This is a chemical straitjacket your beloved son is feeding you to keep you completely sedated. Do you even know where your son actually is right now?" Martha abruptly fell silent, turning her head sharply to the wall to avoid my piercing gaze. But then, as if she could no longer hold it in, she spat out a sentence that froze the blood in my veins. "I know he is not in Germany. I know he is right here, living with that Olivia girl. He told me she is carrying the true heir to our family bloodline. It turned out she knew everything. She knew her son was a cheating bastard. She knew he had an illegitimate child on the way, and she had kept her mouth firmly shut, happily becoming an active accomplice in his massive web of lies, all for the selfish desire to have a grandson to carry on the family name. But the old fool had absolutely no idea that her precious, perfect son was entirely willing to systematically poison his own mother just to achieve his goals. I slammed the pill bottle down on her nightstand, glaring at this sick, pathetic old woman shriveling up on the bed. I felt disgusted by her, yet incredibly sorry for her. She was nothing more than a disposable pawn on Andrew's psychotic chessboard of ambition. The bedroom door clicked shut behind me, completely severing me from the horrific, brutal truth I had just unearthed. The unlabeled white pill bottle sat heavy in my cardigan pocket, but its psychological weight felt like a boulder crushing my chest, making every single step back to my room agonizingly difficult. I dragged my feet into the master suite, a room that used to be my happiest sanctuary, now heavily tainted by coldness and deception. My eyes locked onto the digital wall safe, cleverly hidden behind a large, framed landscape painting. It was where we kept our most critical financial documents and all the darkest secrets Andrew worked so hard to bury. With trembling fingers, I reached for the digital keypad, taking a massive, shuddering breath to calm my violently racing heart. Historically, the passcode for this safe was our wedding anniversary, a sequence of numbers Andrew used to publicly claim was the most sacred date of his entire life. But I now fully understood that those numbers meant absolutely nothing. I mentally pulled up the detailed background report from Max. I recalled the exact birth date of that young blonde girl, Olivia, May 12, 1998, 051298. My fingers glided over the cold metal keys, punching them in one by one. A sharp, mechanical beep echoed in the room. The LED indicator flashed a bright, validating green, and the heavy steel door popped open, violently exposing the absolute darkest, most evil intentions a human soul could harbor. Inside the safe, sitting next to stacks of emergency cash and property deeds, a thick manila folder labeled in blue marker immediately caught my eye. I pulled it out with shaking hands and flipped through the heavy, legal-grade paper. It was a comprehensive life insurance policy for an astronomical sum, officially finalized just 6 months ago. The primary insured party, Catherine. The sole, exclusive beneficiary, Andrew. The total payout amount, $1 million, specifically triggered in the event of the insured's death resulting from a tragic accident. My knees instantly buckled, and I collapsed onto the cold hardwood floor. The heavy binder slipped from my grasp. The bold black numbers and legal jargon danced sadistically before my eyes like a death hex. $1 million. That was the exact price tag my loving, devoted husband had placed on my head. It turned out his recent, overbearing concerns, his constant nagging for me to drive safely and be careful around the house, were not born of love, but out of a psychotic anticipation of a fatal accident that would legally clear his massive payout. But the pure horror did not stop there. Tucked between the dense legal pages was a sheet of yellow legal pad paper, filled with Andrew's distinct, messy handwriting. It was a bulleted list brainstorming highly specific scenarios to stage a fatal accident. A slow gas leak in the kitchen oven. Severed brake lines on my sedan before I drove through the mountain passes. A tragic electrocution incident involving a plugged-in appliance near the master bathtub. Every single line felt like a jagged hunting knife, twisting violently into my chest, leaving deep, permanently bleeding wounds. He didn't just want a simple divorce. He didn't just want to steal my money and properties. He actively wanted me permanently erased from the face of the earth, so he could effortlessly enjoy a lavish, billionaire lifestyle with his young mistress and his new heir. Hot, stinging tears streamed uncontrollably down my face. I wept in total silence. A suffocating mix of pure terror and intense revulsion gripped my throat. I suddenly recalled how Andrew had eagerly volunteered to inspect our gas stove last month, and how he insisted on taking my car to a random, unverified auto shop for maintenance. Death had literally been stalking me inside my own home, hiding behind the charming smile of a model husband. I scanned our massive, luxurious bedroom, seeing his fingerprints on everything. Suddenly, every single corner of this house felt like a rigged death trap, but I knew with absolute certainty that I could not break down now. I had to survive. I had to claw my way out of the grip of this literal demon wearing human skin. And most importantly, I had to make sure he paid the ultimate, devastating price for his sheer cruelty. I aggressively wiped the tears from my face, pulled out my smartphone, and snapped high-resolution photos of every single insurance document and his handwritten murder plots. Before carefully sliding everything back into the blue folder exactly as I found it, I pushed the heavy steel door shut. The loud click of the locking mechanism sounded like a massive iron vault slamming shut on the very last shred of trust and love I possessed. From that exact second forward, Andrew was no longer my husband. He was my mortal enemy, the absolute greatest threat to my life I would ever face. The grandfather clock struck 8 in the evening. I was sitting at the kitchen island, completely numb, staring at a cold plate of dinner, when my phone violently vibrated against the marble countertop. The screen lit up with the caller ID hubby and a FaceTime video request. My stomach instantly tied itself into a knot, and nausea surged up my throat. I took a deep, grounding breath, aggressively forcing my facial muscles into a mask of calm concern, smoothed down my messy hair, and tapped accept. Andrew's face instantly filled the screen. He was bundled up in a thick, heavy North Face winter parka. A thick wool scarf was wrapped tightly around his neck, and a beanie was pulled down over his ears. He looked exactly like a man standing in the middle of a brutal winter storm. Behind him was a generic gray brick wall, and the ambient audio played faint sounds of car horns and muffled conversations in a foreign language. It was a highly orchestrated illusion designed to perfectly mimic a busy European street. Andrew offered a wide smile. His smile was just as radiant and impossibly warm as it had always been, but looking at it now, all I saw was a grotesque, repulsive mask. He started speaking, and a faint wisp of white fog appeared near his mouth. Probably a cheap digital filter effect, or just the steam rising from the hot coffee he was holding. "Honey, I miss you so much. Isn't freezing out here? The snow is piling up. Getting around the city is an absolute nightmare right now." I stared intensely at the high-definition screen and immediately spotted tiny, glistening beads of sweat forming across his forehead. Despite his desperate acting job of pretending to be freezing, it was the peak of a scorching summer here in the States. And even if he had the central AC blasting inside his mistress's luxury condo, wearing a heavy winter parka was obviously suffocating him. I swallowed my disgust and put on a flawless performance of a highly sympathetic wife. "Make sure you bundle up. Honey, please don't catch a cold. Mom is doing much worse today. She keeps asking for you constantly. Seeing you suffer out there in the cold just breaks my heart." Andrew nodded solemnly. A look of deep, fake concern washed over his face, but his eyes were darting nervously off camera, as if he was terrified someone nearby might overhear him. "I know. Please just do your best to take care of Mom for me. The project here is at a critical stage. I can't just fly back. How are things with the finances? Is the money I left you enough?" The topic of money was always the absolute center of his universe. I knew he was drowning in mob debt, terrified that I might actually spend his precious cash, or accidentally discover that the corporate accounts were completely drained. I lowered my eyes, forcing my voice to drop into a whisper tinged with panicked desperation. "Andy, I actually really needed to talk to you about that. Mom took a turn for the worse. The doctor said she needs emergency surgery immediately, followed by incredibly expensive imported medications. The money you left on the card will not even come close to covering it. I was thinking, maybe we should just sell this waterfront estate to pay for Mom's medical bills, and I can wire whatever is left over to you for your investments. The house is way too big for just the two of us anyway." On the screen, I clearly saw a flash of sheer, unadulterated panic explode in Andrew's eyes. He physically jolted, nearly dropping his coffee mug. His voice completely cracked. "Sell the house? Are you out of your damn mind? That house is our life's work. How can you even suggest selling it so casually? We will treat Mom slowly, step by step. If it comes down to it, I'll find the money and wire it to you. Don't you dare put that house on the market. Do you hear me?" His explosive reaction was even more violent than I had anticipated. That multi-million-dollar property was his most valuable asset, his absolute last lifeline, the golden ticket he planned to leverage or sell to pay off his psychotic loan sharks. If I liquidated it, his entire criminal empire would collapse instantly. I shrank back, pretending to be terrified by his sudden screaming, and stammered. But I'm so scared we will run out of time. The doctor explicitly said, if we don't operate right now, Mom might not survive the week. And I read the news. The luxury real estate market is crashing. We should sell right now while the value is still high. Otherwise we will lose millions." Andrew immediately realized he had overreacted and desperately tried to soften his tone, forcing a sickeningly caring voice. "I'm sorry. I'm just so stressed out. That is why I yelled. Just calm down, honey. Don't make any rash decisions. Let me figure something out. I'll call you back later. I have to run into a board meeting right now. I love you." The video feed abruptly cut out, leaving me alone in the dark kitchen. His utter panic and strict ban on selling only solidified my theory. He desperately needed this house. He needed it perfectly intact, ready to be mortgaged or liquidated the very second I suffered my tragic accident. But I was not going to let him play out his sick fantasy. I slammed my phone face down on the marble counter. The corners of my mouth curled into a frigid, predatory smirk. "You want to keep the house? I'm going to liquidate it so fast it will make your head spin. In this game, the person who strikes first wins everything." Bright and early the next morning, while the fog was still rolling heavily off the lake, I called Sarah, an old college friend who was now the managing broker at the city's most elite luxury real estate firm. I demanded an emergency meeting at a highly secluded cafe, miles away from my neighborhood and far from the hospital where Andrew was playing house. Sarah, hearing the absolute urgency in my voice, dropped everything and arrived immediately, clutching her iPad and a stack of listing agreements. Sitting across from me, she stared in complete shock at my exhausted, unusually hardened face, a stark contrast to the quiet, submissive woman everyone thought I was. "I want to list the lakefront estate. Immediately," I stated firmly, skipping all pleasantries. Sarah's jaw practically hit the table. "What on earth are you talking about, Kate? That property is a gold mine. Andrew treats that house like isn't his absolute shrine. Why the sudden rush? Does Andrew even know?" I took a slow sip of my bitter black tea, staring blankly out the window. "Andrew is stuck overseas on business. He left me with full legal authority over the estate. We desperately need a massive injection of liquid cash for a major business deal. We can't delay." I fed her a highly convincing, economically plausible lie. The truth is, Andrew's overseas investments are imploding. He got tangled up with some incredibly dangerous private lenders. They are actively hunting him down. I have to liquidate the house to clear the debts and save his life. Otherwise, they will kill him. Help me sell it as fast as humanly possible, even if it means taking a massive hit under market value. The only thing that matters is pure cash and a closing timeline of less than a week. Hearing this, Sarah went completely pale and nodded frantically. "Oh my God, Kate, how did things get this bad?" "Okay, I'll handle it personally. With that location and those custom interiors, if we drop the price aggressively, investors will literally line up around the block." I set the asking price at $3.5 million, which was roughly $500,000 below its actual appraised value. It was a staggering discount, perfectly designed to ignite the greed of aggressive cash investors, and more than enough to give me a massive war chest to start a brand new life completely off the grid. Sarah immediately blasted the pocket listing to her highly exclusive, private network of ultra-high net worth clients. The subject line read, "Owner facing imminent bankruptcy. Distress sale of prime waterfront estate. Cash only. Closing in 48 hours. The rumor spread like wildfire. I knew that with her extensive high society connections, this juicy gossip would quickly reach Andrew's ears, or at the very least, trigger alerts for his aggressive creditors. Exactly as I predicted, by lunchtime, my phone was absolutely blowing up with calls from aggressive brokers and cash buyers. I carefully vetted the list and agreed to a private evening showing with one specific client, a wealthy tech investor relocating from out of state. In reality, this buyer was a highly trusted associate that Max had called in as a massive favor. He was hired to play the role of a desperate buyer, effectively legalizing the massive cash transfer and rapidly accelerating the closing process, completely bypassing any suspicion from Andrew in case he had spies watching the property. I intentionally wanted to create a highly visible spectacle of extreme financial desperation, making Andrew believe I was pushed against a wall and liquidating everything at fire sale prices. That evening, I walked the client through the estate. I threw open every single window to let the blinding sunset illuminate the darkest corners of the house. I played the role of a devastated, heartbroken housewife perfectly, mournfully describing every custom piece of furniture and expensive painting, acting like a woman about to lose her entire world. The client nodded, feigned deep satisfaction, and immediately signed a contract with a $200,000 non-refundable cash earnest money deposit. The binding agreement was signed right there on the massive mahogany dining table, the exact same table where Andrew had once painted a vivid, fake picture of our glorious future. I held the cashier's check in my hands, feeling absolutely zero joy, only a deep, toxic bitterness. I was literally auctioning off my entire past, my core memories, and my pathetic, naive loyalty, all to buy my own freedom and survival. The news that I had accepted a massive cash deposit for the estate instantly flooded the neighborhood gossip mill. The wealthy neighbors started whispering viciously about our sudden, catastrophic bankruptcy. I knew Andrew was hiding somewhere in this very city, and he would absolutely hear the news. He would be panicking, absolutely furious, but he was physically incapable of showing his face. He was firmly locked into his fake role of the hardworking husband trapped in Germany. If he suddenly appeared to stop the sale, his entire grand illusion would shatter, and he would be forced to face the violent mobsters hunting him for their money. He was completely trapped in the very cage he had built, and I was slowly, methodically tightening the noose around his neck. After securing the deposit, I drove to a rundown strip mall on the outskirts of town, bought an untraceable prepaid burner phone, and a cheap SIM card. Sitting in the driver's seat of my Civic, I popped the SIM card in. My hands trembled slightly at the sheer magnitude of what I was about to do. I did not actually hate this girl, Olivia, or rather, my white-hot hatred for Andrew completely eclipsed any anger toward her. She was just another victim, a naive pawn on this psychopath's chessboard. She genuinely believed in his fairy tale romance, his promises of raising the sole heir to his legacy, completely oblivious to the fact that she was just a pig being fattened up for the slaughter. I opened the encrypted photo file of the life insurance documents I had found in Andrew's safe. Right underneath my own death policy was a second, identical policy issued in the name of Olivia Smith. The sole beneficiary, without a doubt, was Andrew. The payout was $500,000. The policy activation date was exactly 2 months ago, right when her pregnancy became physically undeniable. It turned out Andrew didn't just want me dead. He had carefully planned for the highly lucrative possibility that Olivia might conveniently die during childbirth or suffer a tragic postpartum accident. He wanted the baby, he wanted the massive payouts, and he wanted to permanently erase every single woman who could potentially be a financial burden to him. I quickly typed out a text message and sent it to the phone number Max had pulled for Olivia. Do you honestly think you are the love of his life? Or are you just a fattened calf waiting for the slaughterhouse? Look at this very closely before you keep dreaming about your happily ever after. Attached to the text was a crystal clear photo of the signature page of her life insurance policy. I used the photo editor to draw a thick red circle around the line, reading, Beneficiary, Andrew. I hit send. My heart hammered against my ribs, waiting for the fallout. Less than 5 minutes later, the burner phone lit up. It was Olivia's number. I let it ring for a few agonizing seconds, then answered the call, remaining dead silent. On the other end of the line, a young, utterly terrified voice trembled violently. Hello? Who is this? Who sent me this? Who are you? Why do you have this? Her voice cracked, punctuated by sharp, panicked sobs. She was probably locked inside a hospital bathroom, hiding out of earshot from Andrew. I intentionally lowered my voice, making it sound raspy and dead cold. Who I'm doesn't matter. What matters is that your life is in extreme danger. You think he loves you? He loves your money. He loves that kid in your stomach. And he loves the $500,000 he gets the second your heart stops beating. Read the fine print. You idiot. Isn't an accidental death policy. If you tragically bleed out on the operating table or accidentally slip and fall down a flight of stairs, he becomes a very rich man. Olivia went dead silent. All I could hear was her heavy, hyperventilating breath, the agonizing silence of a woman's entire reality crashing down around her. Then, she broke down into loud, hysterical sobs. No, isn't impossible. Andrew loves me. He swore he was taking me and our son home. You are lying. You are his psycho, jealous wife. Yes. I let out a dry, mocking laugh. Whether you believe me or not is your own problem. But ask yourself this. Why did he secretly take out a policy on your life and hide it from you? Why is his entire life a massive secret? I believed his lies just like you did. And right now I'm fire selling my house to pay off his gambling debts to the mob. Wake up, little girl, before you end up in a body bag. I hung up the phone, ripped off the back cover, snapped the SIM card in half, and tossed the pieces out the car window into a storm drain. I knew with absolute certainty that the seed of pure paranoia was now planted deep in Olivia's mind. A pregnant woman is naturally hypervigilant and anxious. Once she started doubting him, she would watch Andrew's every move like a hawk, noticing every slip-up, every cold calculation in his eyes. And when two betrayed women, even just conceptually, stood on the same side, a monster like him would have absolutely nowhere left to hide. I looked at my reflection in the rearview mirror and saw a stranger, cold, calculating, and ruthless. But I had no other choice. I had to become the apex predator, so I wouldn't end up as a chalk outline. That evening, a torrential downpour slammed into the city. The rain whipped against the windshield as if trying to wash away the filthy, rotten core of human nature. I pulled up to a high-rise office building downtown and took the elevator to the top floor, where Ian, a former law school classmate of mine, was waiting. Ian was a highly feared, fiercely private attorney who specialized in ultra-complex, high-asset divorces and vicious corporate litigation. I walked into his mahogany-paneled office, took off my soaking wet raincoat, and slammed a massive binder of documents onto his desk, evidence I had paid for with my sanity and my tears. Ian grabbed the binder. Initially, his face held a mask of bored professional courtesy, but as he aggressively flipped through the pages, his jaw literally dropped. When he hit the $1 million life insurance policy and the handwritten notes detailing how to fake my accidental death, Ian slammed his fist onto the desk. His voice shook with genuine horror. "Kate, you are married to a literal psychopath. This isn't just about hiding money. He is actively plotting your murder. These blueprints, gas leaks, brake tampering, this is highly calculated, premeditated homicide." I sat rigidly in the leather chair across from him, my hands clasped so tightly my knuckles ached, trying to stop the violent shaking in my arms. My voice came out shockingly flat. "I know. That is exactly why I need you. I'm filing for divorce, but absolutely not right now. I need to sign over an ironclad power of attorney so you can legally liquidate and handle every single asset in my absence. I have to get out of this state, Ian. Staying here one more day means putting my head on a chopping block. He will kill me." Ian nodded frantically. His sharp eyes were filled with deep concern. "Get out tonight. The sooner the better. Leave the entire legal war to me." With this evidence, the illegal sedation of his mother, the forged loan documents, the premeditated murder conspiracy for insurance fraud, he won't just lose his assets and his kid. He is going straight to federal prison for decades. But you have to disappear first. We quickly drafted and notarized every necessary legal document. I signed page after page. The black ink staining the white paper felt like permanent scars being carved into my life. Then, I executed the most critical move of my entire counteroffensive, the massive wire transfer. The $200,000 cash deposit from the house, along with every single penny of my personal life savings that I had secretly drained from our joint accounts, was wired directly into an ultra-secure offshore trust account that Ian had prearranged. This was the money I had painstakingly saved over 12 years, meant for our retirement, meant for the children we never had. But now, it was my survival fund, my sole capital to vanish and build a new life entirely off the grid. Seeing the green wire successful confirmation flash on my phone screen, I felt a massive wave of relief completely drowned in bitter sorrow. Those digital numbers were the only things left standing in the ashes of my destroyed marriage. I no longer had a home, a husband, or a family, just myself, and a violent, desperate will to survive. Ian walked me to the private elevator bank, giving my shoulder a firm, reassuring squeeze. "You are incredibly tough, Kate. Go live your life, and don't ever look over your shoulder. When the dust settles and the feds step in, I'll send you a secure message." I walked out of the towering glass lobby. The rain had stopped, but the sky remained a bruised, heavy gray. I looked up at the towering skyscrapers glittering with city lights. Up there, thousands of families were probably gathering for warm, happy dinners, while I stood freezing on a street corner, utterly alone. But I could not afford a single second of weakness, because my enemy wasn't just a cheating husband, but a highly lethal, psychopathic conspiracy waiting in the shadows to murder me. The massive chef's kitchen smelled incredible, filled with the rich aroma of a traditional Sunday pot roast, creamy mashed potatoes, and thick gravy. These were the exact comfort foods my mother-in-law, Martha, absolutely adored. Tonight, I had cooked a massive, celebratory feast, setting the table with our finest bone china and a crystal vase full of blood-red roses. From the outside, it looked like a perfect, loving family dinner. But for me, It was the Last Supper, a final, permanent goodbye to the people I had falsely called family for over a decade. I helped Martha shuffle from her bedroom to the dining room table. Tonight, she looked significantly more alert. That was likely because for the past few days, I had secretly been flushing Andrew's toxic sedatives down the toilet and replacing them in her milk with standard, harmless vitamin C pills. She sat down, her eyes widening greedily at the massive spread of food, but out of pure, bitter habit, she immediately started criticizing. Did you win the lottery or something? Why are you wasting money like this? The money my auntie sends home is meant to be saved, not blown on fancy dinners. He is working his fingers to the bone over in Europe, and you just sit here eating and burning through his cash. I smiled, though the smile didn't reach my dead eyes, and carefully placed a tender, slow-cooked piece of beef onto her plate. Eat up, Mom. I braised this roast for 6 hours. I wanted to make something really special tonight, to celebrate that your health is finally improving. Martha scoffed, grabbed her fork, and enthusiastically shoved the food into her mouth. Watching her gorge herself without a single ounce of guilt or remorse, I felt an indescribable emptiness. This was the woman I had genuinely treated like my own flesh and blood, bathing her, feeding her, and cleaning up her messes without a single complaint when she was paralyzed. When she was nearly full, I set my fork down, stared directly into her eyes, and asked in a low, dangerous tone, Mom, I'm going to ask you this one final time. Do you know where Andrew actually is? Is he really in Germany? Martha froze with a spoonful of mashed potatoes halfway to her mouth. She shot me a nervous, sideways glance. Her eyes darted around the room like a rat trapped in a corner. But then, she instantly threw on a mask of pure, aggressive rage to cover her panic. She slammed her fork down onto the expensive china and screamed at me. What kind of stupid question is that? If he isn't in Germany, where else would he be? He FaceTimed me. He told me it was freezing, that there was snow up to his knees. You are his wife, yet you treat him like a criminal. All you do is spy on him. He is out there making millions to keep a roof over your ungrateful head. If you don't appreciate him, then at least shut your mouth and stop interrogating me. The lies flowed from her mouth so smoothly, without a single stutter, without a shred of shame. She blindly protected her sociopathic son, completely disregarding the truth, morality, and my own sanity. I stared at her. My lingering disappointment instantly froze into absolute Arctic indifference. She knew Andrew was right here in the city. She knew he had a pregnant mistress. She knew he was running a massive scam against me. Yet she actively played her part to the bitter end. And the sickest irony of all was that she had no idea her precious, perfect boy, the son she was risking everything to protect, was secretly poisoning her every single night just to keep her out of his way. Her aggressive stupidity and sheer cruelty severed the absolute last thread of humanity tying me to this family. I understand. I was just asking, I replied quietly, standing up to clear the dirty plates. Deep down, I already knew the answer, and I had finalized my decision regarding her fate. I was not going to leave her in this mansion, because this house was going to have a new owner by tomorrow morning. The new buyer would legally throw her out onto the street immediately, but I certainly wasn't taking her with me, either. I absolutely refused to spend another second acting as a free, abused nursemaid to such an inherently evil woman. The torrential rain poured relentlessly through the night, as if trying to drown the city in absolute darkness. Inside the grand living room of the estate, the massive crystal chandelier still blazed brightly, but the atmosphere was thick, tense, and freezing cold. The buyer's legal representative, a quiet, intimidating man in a sharp suit, had arrived to finalize the closing paperwork. He meticulously reviewed the contracts, verified my signatures, and gave a curt nod to his associate, who instantly initiated the final wire transfer. My phone buzzed, confirming the massive remaining balance had successfully cleared into my offshore account. It was a staggering amount of cash, bought and paid for with 12 years of my ruined life. I signed the final transfer of deed. The stroke of my pen was aggressive and decisive, like a surgeon violently slicing out a malignant tumor. Thank you, Catherine. You have exactly 48 hours to vacate and remove your personal belongings. After that, we change the locks and take full physical possession of the property, the man stated coldly before turning on his heel and walking out into the rain. I was left standing entirely alone in the massive, echoing space that used to be my home. I didn't sit down to cry. Time was a luxury I simply didn't have. I immediately pulled out my phone and called a premium liquidator and junk removal service, paying them triple their emergency rate to arrive immediately. In the dead of night, to strip the house down to the studs. The custom Italian leather sectional Andrew loved to brag about to his golf buddies. The handcrafted walnut dining table, the $50,000 surround sound system he valued significantly more than his own wife. I fire-sold it all for absolute pennies. I wanted to violently erase every single trace of him, stripping away all the flashy, expensive toys he used to mask his hollow, pathetic existence. Watching the burly movers haul his prized possessions out into the pouring rain and toss them into moving trucks, I felt a twisted, vindictive joy mixed with a heavy bitterness. The mansion rapidly emptied. The sound of work boots echoed loudly off the bare marble floors. I walked down the main hallway, running my fingers over the blank walls where our massive, framed wedding portraits used to hang. Portraits I had personally ripped down and thrown into the fireplace earlier that evening. Every single memory, the laughter, the tears, the fake milestones we had celebrated in this house, had been reduced to literal ashes. I packed only a single, medium-sized suitcase with my clothes, my passport, and a framed photograph of my late parents. That was the only thing in this entire estate that genuinely belonged to me, my sole emotional anchor in this violent storm. I stood in the center of the massive, empty living room, staring out the floor-to-ceiling windows as the rain aggressively battered the glass, trying to break through. Outside was pitch black, but I knew that the second I stepped out that front door, I would step into the blinding light of total freedom. Tonight, I would sleep on the floor of this house on a cheap yoga mat for the very last time. The freezing chill of the marble seeped into my bones, but it made my mind sharper and clearer than it had ever been. I spent the night reflecting on my past, mourning the naive, pathetic girl who genuinely believed in the illusion of forever. But that extreme agony had forged me in fire, turning me into someone entirely different, someone hardened, ruthless, and absolutely merciless when pushed against a wall. Tomorrow, this multi-million-dollar estate would belong to a complete stranger, and my future would belong exclusively to me. I would never, ever depend on another human being again, especially not a monster named Andrew. At dawn, I woke Martha up, washed her face, and dressed her in a clean set of clothes. Martha looked around the completely barren room, noticing the missing flat-screen TV and empty dressers, and panicked. What happened to the house? Where is all our stuff? Did we get robbed? I calmly brushed her thinning hair and replied in a flat tone, "No robbers, Mom. Today, I'm checking you into a specialized medical facility for a new treatment program. The doctor said you need round-the-clock monitoring for a few weeks, and I hired contractors to completely renovate the house, so everything will be brand new when Andrew gets back." Hearing her son's name and the promise of a luxury renovation for his return, Martha's eyes lit up with absolute greed. She nodded enthusiastically, instantly forgetting how bizarre it was that the entire house had been stripped bare overnight. I helped her into a medical transport taxi I had hailed to the front gate. I had already sold my old Honda to a used car lot for cash the previous afternoon. The taxi pulled away, leaving the grand waterfront estate shrinking in the rearview mirror, permanently fading into my past. Martha sat in the back seat, eagerly looking out the window, muttering to herself about what fancy meals she would demand when her son returned. Completely oblivious to the fact that this was a permanent, one-way trip, the taxi pulled up to the gates of a massive, state-of-the-art assisted living facility on the far outskirts of the city, surrounded by manicured parks and high-tech security. I had already paid for her room and board for exactly 1 year in advance, using a tiny fraction of the house money. It was the absolute best I was willing to do for her. My final, obligatory act of charity as her daughter-in-law. I flagged down an orderly to bring a wheelchair and wheel her toward the intake desk. Martha looked around the sterile lobby, saw dozens of elderly people slumped in wheelchairs, and looked at me with sudden suspicion. "Is this a hospital? It looks weird. Why are there only old people here? Isn't an elite rehabilitation center, Mom. They have top-tier doctors and nurses on staff 24/7. They will take far better care of you than I ever could," I explained briskly. I knelt down next to her wheelchair, my eyes locked onto her frail, bony neck, where a heavy, antique gold locket set with a massive amber stone rested against her skin. It was a priceless family heirloom my own mother had given me right before she died. On my wedding day, like an absolute naive idiot, I had placed it around my mother-in-law's neck as a grand gesture of ultimate respect, desperately hoping she would accept and love me as her own daughter. But for 12 years, all she gave me in return was cold hostility and endless exploitation. I reached out and firmly, aggressively grabbed the gold chain. Martha physically flinched, yanked her head back, and glared at me. "What the hell are you doing? Are you trying to mug me?" "That is mine." I gripped the chain tight, staring directly into her cloudy, terrified eyes, and spoke with absolute, icy venom. "Mom, this is a sacred memory of my dead mother. I let you borrow it for 12 years. I'm taking it back right now. You don't deserve to have this touching your skin." I unclasped the locket and ripped it from her neck. The residual warmth of the amber stone resting in my palm felt like a massive comfort to my soul. Martha opened her mouth to scream for security, but the nurses quickly surrounded her, speaking in soothing tones as they forcefully wheeled her toward the locked residential wing. She twisted around in her chair. Her expression morphed from pure rage to total confusion, and finally to sheer, absolute terror when she realized I was standing perfectly still by the exit doors, making zero effort to follow her. I raised my hand and gave her a slow, mocking wave, the kind of wave you give to a stranger on a passing train, and turned on my heel to walk out. Her desperate, blood-curdling scream, "Kate, where are you going? Don't leave me here, Kate," echoed violently through the cavernous lobby, but I didn't break my stride. I pushed through the heavy glass doors of the facility and took a massive, deep breath of pure, unadulterated freedom. No more burdens, no more chains. No more walking on eggshells just to survive in my own home. The amber locket clutched in my fist caught the morning sun, burning brightly as proof that I had finally reclaimed my soul. I hailed another cab and told the driver, "SeaTac Airport. Step on it." I looked down at my left hand, staring at my ring finger, where a faint, pale indentation was the only proof my diamond wedding band had ever existed. The brand of my slavery was gone forever. Time flew by mercilessly. A full year had passed since I fled that city of lies. Later, through the frantic gossip of old neighbors and the few mutual friends I had allowed to keep my contact info, I was able to piece together the exact details of Andrew's grand return the day he undoubtedly believed would be his triumphant victory lap. It was a scorching, blistering summer afternoon. An Uber carrying Andrew, Olivia, and their 1-year-old baby boy pulled up to the towering wrought iron gates of the familiar waterfront estate. Andrew stepped out of the car with incredible arrogance, gesturing grandly toward the mansion like a billionaire king presenting a castle to his new queen. He was wearing a crisp, tailored linen suit, his hair slicked back perfectly, a heavy gold Rolex flashing on his wrist. He was trying with every fiber of his being to look like a highly successful executive, returning from a massive corporate triumph overseas. Olivia stepped out, struggling to hold the crying toddler. Her face was heavily contoured with makeup, but it couldn't hide her deep exhaustion and underlying anxiety. She stared up at the sprawling mansion, her eyes instantly burning with sheer, unfiltered greed. For an entire year, Andrew had likely been filling her head with fantasies of living like royalty in this exact house, telling her she would take my place, surrounded by a staff of maids and chefs. Andrew strutted confidently up to the massive front doors, digging through his pockets for his keys. Jamming the key into the deadbolt, he yelled out obnoxiously, "Kate, open the door. Your husband is home. Why is this locked?" But to his absolute shock, the key wouldn't slide in. The entire locking mechanism was completely different. He scowled, muttered a string of vicious curses, and began pounding violently on the heavy oak door. The sound of his fists slamming against the wood echoed down the quiet, wealthy street. He genuinely assumed I had changed the locks out of petty jealousy, or that I was just being lazy and sleeping in. That stupid old hag. Her husband comes home from a year abroad and she can't even drag herself out of bed to greet me. She changed the locks just to throw a tantrum. Andrew sneered to Olivia, desperately trying to mask his rising panic. "Don't worry, baby. My psycho wife is probably just having one of her episodes. I'll make her open the door, and then I'll literally throw her out onto the curb so you and my son can move in." Olivia, hiding nervously behind Andrew's broad shoulders, peeked around him into the front courtyard. The landscaping was totally different. The statues were gone, and the patio furniture was completely unfamiliar. Nothing matched. The photos Andrew had shown her. Andrew leaned on the doorbell, holding it down relentlessly, but he was met with a terrifying, hollow silence from inside the house. No footsteps, not a single sign of my existence. Andrew's temper exploded. He whipped out his smartphone to scream at me, only to suddenly remember that my phone number had been completely disconnected and untraceable for the last 12 months. Absolute rage boiled over. He started kicking the custom door, screaming my name at the top of his lungs, hurling the most vile, degrading insults imaginable. The commotion was so loud that the wealthy neighbors began stepping out onto their manicured lawns, watching the meltdown with a mix of shock and twisted amusement. He had absolutely no idea that the woman he was currently threatening to kill was sitting in a penthouse halfway across the world. And this estate hadn't belonged to us for over a year. Finally, the heavy oak doors swung open. But it wasn't me standing there. A massive, heavily muscled man, wearing only gym shorts, stepped out. His chest and arms were completely covered in aggressive biker tattoos, skulls, eagles, and barbed wire. In his massive fist, he held a thick chain leash attached to a 130-pound Rottweiler, which instantly bared its teeth and unleashed a terrifying, guttural snarl at Andrew. The man glared at Andrew through the screen door. His eyes were murderous, looking like he wanted to rip the head off whoever had just woken him from his afternoon nap. His voice was a deep, gravelly bark. "Who the hell are you? Do you have a death wish, kicking my damn door like that?" Andrew froze in pure terror. His face drained of all color, turning a sickly, ghostly white. He stumbled backward down the porch steps and stammered, Who are you? Why are you inside my house? Where is my wife? Where is Kate?" The massive man let out a cruel, barking laugh and spit on the expensive driveway pavers. "Your house? Are you tweaking on something, buddy? I bought this estate in cash a year ago. I have the goddamn deed filed with the county under my name. Who the hell is Kate?" "I don't know any Kate. All I know is the previous owner fire-sold this place to liquidate her assets and pay off her debts, and she skipped the country a year ago." The man's words struck Andrew like a catastrophic lightning bolt. He was completely paralyzed. He refused to believe his own ears and began screaming hysterically, "You are lying. This is my property. I was deployed overseas on a corporate contract. My wife was watching the house. How could she legally sell it without my physical signature? You are a squatter. You are a fraud who stole my house. I'm calling the cops." The tattooed man didn't even bother arguing. He simply turned around, grabbed a manila folder from the entryway table, marched back, and violently shoved a notarized copy of the closing documents directly into Andrew's chest. "Open your damn eyes and read it, you psycho. The sale is completely legally binding, fully notarized with both of your signatures. Your wife explicitly told the brokers you signed a full power of attorney so she could liquidate the property to pay off the mobsters you owed money to. Now get off my property before I unleash the dog." Andrew, his hands shaking violently, grabbed the paperwork and stared at the signature line. Right next to my perfect signature was his own signature. He was completely stunned. He suddenly remembered the massive stack of dense corporate legal documents he had rapidly, blindly signed right before his fake flight to Frankfurt, genuinely assuming they were routine tax filings. It turned out he had unwittingly signed a bulletproof power of attorney, granting me absolute legal authority to sell the estate. Olivia, standing a few feet away, heard the entire exchange and felt her knees buckle. The toddler in her arms began screaming from the oppressive heat. She instantly realized the horrifying truth, lunged forward, snatched the legal documents out of Andrew's hands, and began shrieking like a banshee. "You lied to me. You promised me this mansion was yours. You said I was going to be the lady of the house. Where is the house? Where is the money? You are a broke, lying piece of trash." Olivia began hysterically sobbing, violently scratching at Andrew's face and tearing his expensive linen suit. The screaming, the violent slapping, the baby shrieking, the Rottweiler barking wildly. It all blended into a chaotic, incredibly pathetic public spectacle. The wealthy neighbors pulled out their phones, recording and laughing at the sociopathic husband, who thought he was playing a brilliant game overseas, only to return completely bankrupt, having had his multi-million-dollar estate legally sold out from under him by his own wife. Andrew stood in the dead center of this humiliating hurricane, his head hanging in total defeat. He realized in that exact moment that he hadn't just lost his fortune and his wife, he had become a viral laughingstock. His grand delusion of a billionaire lifestyle shattered into dust right on the driveway of the estate he used to own. Violently chased off the property by the tattooed owner and publicly beaten by Olivia, Andrew, looking like a pathetic, cornered rat, was forced to drag his mistress and crying child back into the waiting Uber, completely coated in shame. Sitting in the back of the cab, clutching the last few $100s he had left from his degenerate partying in the city while pretending to be in Germany, a sudden thought hit him. He remembered his mother. The thought of Martha sparked like a dying flare in the dark. "Right, Mom. That weak, pathetic Kate would never have the guts to abandon my mother. Mom definitely knows where she ran off to, where she is hiding my money," he muttered frantically to himself. He ordered the driver to head to the address of the assisted living facility, an address he had dug up from a year-old text message I had sent him, a message he had completely ignored while he was busy sleeping with Olivia. The Uber pulled up to the gates of the nursing home. It was located in a grim industrial area on the far edge of the county, looking absolutely nothing like the luxury rehabilitation center it had been on the day I dropped Martha off. Over the past year, the facility had clearly lost funding, its facade crumbling and depressing. Andrew sprinted into the lobby and demanded to see Martha. The receptionist looked at him with intense pity, flipped through a thick binder, and let out a heavy sigh. "Are you Martha's son? Why are you only showing up now? She has been crying for you for 12 months. The massive upfront payment Catherine made dried up 3 months ago. We called the emergency number you provided dozens of times, but it was permanently disconnected. Right now, she is living in the Medicaid-funded overflow wing for wards of the state. Her condition is horrific." Hearing this, a loud, piercing ring echoed in Andrew's ears, and he sprinted in the direction the nurse pointed. The state-funded ward was buried deep in the basement of the facility. The air was damp and reeked horribly of bleach, ammonia, and soiled linens. He spotted his mother. Martha was slumped sideways in a rusted, broken wheelchair shoved into a dark corner of the hallway. She was entirely skin and bones. Her hair was stark white, completely matted and filthy. Her hollow, sunken eyes stared blankly at a peeling wall. She was wearing a threadbare hospital gown completely covered in dark food stains. "Mom, isn't me. Isn't Andrew. I came back for you." Andrew dropped to his knees on the filthy linoleum floor and burst into tears. Martha heard her son's voice and slowly, agonizingly turned her head. Her cloudy eyes narrowed, intensely studying the face of the man sobbing at her feet. And then, instead of pulling him into a loving embrace and crying tears of joy like he desperately expected, Martha began to violently shake with pure, unadulterated rage. She gathered every last ounce of strength left in her dying body, raised her skeletal, bruised hand, and viciously slapped Andrew directly across the face. "You ungrateful bastard! Where the hell have you been? You abandoned me in this hellhole to rot. Your wife left. She sold everything. Why are you even here? Did you come to check if I was dead yet?" She screamed and wailed hysterically. Her raspy, broken cries were absolutely agonizing to hear. Andrew remained on his knees, taking the physical abuse. Every single strike from his mother felt like a barbed whip lashing against his black, rotten soul. He realized in that moment that the most terrifying punishment wasn't going bankrupt, but experiencing the absolute, hateful rejection of his own mother. A nurse rushed down the hall to separate them and violently shoved a thick stack of past-due invoices into Andrew's chest. "Please pay the outstanding balance immediately. Medications, adult diapers, room and board, the total is over $20,000. If you can't produce the funds today, we are legally required to transfer her to a maximum security state asylum." Andrew grabbed the invoices with shaking hands. In his pockets, he barely had enough cash to cover the Uber ride back to the city. Where the hell was he going to magically produce 20 grand? Olivia, standing near the elevators with the baby strapped to her chest, watched this horrific, pathetic scene unfold. Her extreme disappointment fully morphed into absolute disgust. She finally realized she had bet her entire youth and future on a man who wasn't just completely broke, but a massive, toxic liability. Andrew slowly stumbled out of the nursing home doors. His mother's agonizing, hateful screams still echoed in his head like a permanent curse. He had never, in his wildest nightmares, imagined a day where he would be so incredibly destitute that he couldn't even scrape together a few $1,000s to keep his own mother out of an asylum. But the true nightmare was only just beginning. When he took a cab back to his corporate headquarters, the massive construction firm that was once his crowning achievement, the heavy glass doors were chained shut, plastered with bright red seizure notices from the IRS and federal bankruptcy courts. He froze on the sidewalk, staring at the massive legal notices announcing the total liquidation of all corporate assets to pay off astronomical tax fraud debts, and he felt the concrete sidewalk physically drop out from under him. It turned out that the day before I fled, I had FedExed a massive, meticulously organized binder of evidence directly to the FBI, the IRS, and the SEC. It contained absolute proof of his offshore money laundering, massive tax evasion, and the completely fake shell company contracts he had been running for the past 3 years. The numbers were bulletproof. They coldly and methodically exposed the psychotic greed of a man who thought he could steal millions without leaving a paper trail. Andrew's burner phone suddenly began ringing incessantly. But the caller ID didn't show wealthy investors or golf buddies. It showed blocked numbers belonging to violent mob enforcers. The short-term, high-interest loans he took out to day trade crypto had now compounded with astronomical penalty interest, mutating into a financial monster preparing to violently execute him. Andrew panicked, ripped the battery out of his phone, snapped the SIM card, and threw it into a dumpster. A freezing, terrifying sweat completely soaked through his ruined linen suit. He fled to a cheap, moldy motel room in a dangerous part of town, where a furious, exhausted Olivia was waiting for him, rocking a screaming baby. Seeing Andrew walk through the door completely empty-handed, without a single dollar or a bag of groceries, Olivia hurled a dirty diaper at his head and screamed at the top of her lungs. "You came back with nothing again? The baby is screaming because he is starving to death. You swore to me you were a multimillionaire. You said you owned a mansion and an empire. Why the hell are we sleeping on a moldy mattress in a crack motel? Shut your damn mouth and stop whining. My head is already splitting open," Andrew roared back, his face contorted with psychotic rage, looking exactly like a rabid, cornered animal. He lunged across the room and started violently ripping through Olivia's diaper bag, hunting for any spare cash to go buy liquor. Olivia screamed in terror and tried to wrestle the bag away from him. They began physically fighting and shoving each other in the cramped, suffocatingly small motel room. "That is the absolute last of my savings. I hid that to buy baby formula. You psychopath. I wish to God I never believed your lies. I wasted the best years of my life on a con artist," Olivia sobbed hysterically, dropping to the floor and curling her body around her baby like a human shield. Andrew stood over her, looking down at his young, beautiful mistress, who was now bruised, disheveled, and rapidly aging from extreme stress and starvation. He suddenly threw his head back and let out a bitter, manic laugh. He finally realized that the second the money ran out, the true love he thought he had bought with Olivia was thinner than wet paper. He thought of me, his fiercely loyal, intelligent wife who used to split cheap ramen noodles with him in a tiny apartment, who stayed awake for days nursing him when he had the flu, the woman he had so brutally discarded. A massive wave of agonizing, belated regret crashed into his soul, but it was immediately violently suppressed by pure, animalistic terror for his life. One rainy, freezing evening months later, Andrew was huddled inside a dirty, run-down roadside diner. Sitting in front of him was a plate of cheap, watery mashed potatoes and a heavily burnt hamburger patty. He inhaled the food like a starving stray dog, completely ignoring the disgusted glares from the waitress when he begged for a free cup of hot water. On the grease-stained television mounted in the corner of the diner, a national entertainment news broadcast was playing. The audio barely cut through the sound of semi-trucks roaring past the window. Andrew absently glanced up at the screen, and his cheap metal fork slipped from his fingers, clattering loudly against the ceramic plate. Food spilled everywhere. Smiling brightly on the high-definition TV screen was an incredibly elegant, aristocratic woman. She was wearing a flawless, custom-tailored white designer suit. Her long, jet-black hair fell perfectly over her shoulders, and her sharp, glowing eyes radiated absolute, terrifying power and authority. The breaking news ticker at the bottom of the screen read, "American business magnate and art philanthropist Catherine returns to the States to spearhead a billion-dollar cultural center development project." It was me, Kate, the exact same wife Andrew firmly believed had died in a gutter from poverty and depression. Andrew violently rubbed his eyes, genuinely believing he was hallucinating. The absolute powerhouse on the screen was miles away from the quiet, submissive, beaten-down housewife he remembered. I was giving a press conference about international art investments, funding grants for young American prodigies, and my desire to build a massive legacy in my home country. My voice was just as smooth as he remembered, but now, it resonated with a lethal, untouchable confidence that commanded absolute respect. Andrew looked down at his filthy, stained jacket, and then back up at the billionaire version of me on the screen. The reality of the contrast hit him like a physical punch to the throat. She is not dead. She is a multimillionaire," Andrew whispered out loud, his filthy, trembling hand reaching up to touch the TV screen as if trying to grasp a ghost. He remembered the pathetic $50,000 he had tossed at me before his fake flight, remembered his utter disgust for me. It turned out I hadn't just survived his betrayal. I had weaponized it to become infinitely more powerful than he could ever dream of being. Inside his rotting brain, greedy, parasitic thoughts began to swarm once again. He thought about his massive, lethal debts to the mob, and his current, pathetic existence sleeping in alleys. If I was this incredibly rich and famous, and legally, the divorce papers were never actually finalized, it meant he was still technically, legally, my husband. He believed he had a total legal right to at least half of my massive new fortune. Andrew frantically dug a stolen prepaid phone out of his pocket, dialed my old number, a number burned into his memory only to hear the cold, automated operator state, "The number you have dialed is no longer in service." But like a cockroach, he refused to give up. He relentlessly harassed the diner staff, spent weeks stalking my former colleagues on LinkedIn, and terrorized our old mutual friends, demanding contact info for Catherine the billionaire. His blinding greed completely lobotomized him, making him totally forget that a massive, uncrossable canyon of attempted murder and pure hatred now stood between us. After weeks of his pathetic, desperate stalking, I finally instructed my security team to allow a meeting. The location was not a quiet coffee shop or a luxury restaurant. It was the icy, glass-walled conference room of Ian's downtown law firm, a room that represented the absolute, merciless, crushing power of the legal system. I sat perfectly upright in a massive leather executive chair, my back to the floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the Seattle skyline, casually spinning a solid gold Mont Blanc pen between my fingers. The heavy mahogany doors swung open, and Andrew was shoved inside. He looked utterly pathetic. His eyes darted frantically around the room, desperately trying to mask his overwhelming greed at the sight of the ultra-luxurious legal office. Andrew tried to lunge forward to grab my hands, but two massive, armed private security guards instantly stepped in and blocked him. He froze. A sickly, twisted, fake smile stretched across his gaunt face. "Kate, you are back? I have been looking everywhere for you. Do you have any idea how terrified I was for you this past year? I genuinely thought you were dead. I'm so incredibly sorry." He instantly launched into his rehearsed, pathetic theater of remorse. Giant crocodile tears welled up in his eyes. His voice shook with fake emotion, playing the role of a desperate, loving husband reunited with his soulmate. I slowly spun my chair to face him. My eyes held absolutely zero love, zero anger, only the cold, clinical disgust you would show a cockroach trapped in a jar. "Were you terrified for my safety, or terrified that your personal ATM had vanished?" I asked. My voice was dead calm, but razor sharp. Andrew visibly flinched and stammered. "How can you even say that? We were married for over a decade. How can you think so low of me? I know I screwed up with Olivia, but that was just a momentary lapse in judgment. She conned me. She intentionally stopped taking her pills to trap me with a pregnancy. I have only ever truly loved you, Kate. You are my soulmate." I didn't say a single word. I simply slid a thick, heavy black binder across the polished glass table toward him. "Look at this. Look very, very closely." Andrew reached out with violently shaking hands and opened the cover. Inside were dozens of high-definition photos of him and Olivia kissing, vacationing, and laughing, photos he had arrogantly texted to his friends, bragging about his young mistress, which Max had easily hacked and recovered. Next were pages of bank wire receipts. And finally, a highly classified medical file containing forged psychiatric evaluations diagnosing me with severe schizophrenia. He had literally paid a dirty doctor to declare me legally insane so he could forcibly lock me inside a mental asylum and seize control of my assets, just in case his plan to murder me in a car crash failed. "You claim you were conned? Then who paid 20 grand to falsify my medical records to have me committed? Who secretly bought a $1 million accidental death policy on his wife, and then spent a week searching Google for ways to cleanly sever the brake lines on her sedan?" I fired the questions at him like bullets, each one striking a fatal blow to his pathetic lies. Andrew's face turned the color of wet ash. The heavy binder slipped from his hands, crashing to the floor. The glossy photos scattered across the expensive rug. He finally realized that the terrifying, untouchable billionaire sitting in front of him was not the naive, broken housewife he thought he could manipulate. I possessed a mountain of hard, undeniable evidence, capable of burying him in a federal penitentiary until he died of old age. "Kate, please, I'm begging you. Forgive me. I'm a sick man. I owe millions to the cartel. They are literally going to torture me to death. You are worth $1 billion now. Just save my life this one last time. Have some mercy. I'll sign whatever divorce papers you want. I'll disappear off the face of the earth, and you will never see me again." Andrew violently threw himself to the floor, crawling on his knees, sobbing hysterically. Staring down at this pathetic, sniveling creature, I felt a deep, sickening pity for my younger self. How could I have ever loved and sacrificed my entire youth for such an absolute piece of garbage? I stood up, smoothed down the fabric of my suit, and looked down at him like a god looking at an insect. I'm not a charity, Andrew. Actions have consequences. The federal government will handle your sentencing. I only came here today to watch you realize the exact price of your betrayal. Realizing that his pathetic begging was utterly useless, Andrew's mask completely evaporated, revealing his true, psychotic nature. He jumped to his feet, aggressively wiping the tears from his face. His begging eyes instantly hardened into pure, venomous malice and calculation. He knew he was backed into a lethal corner, so he decided to play his absolute final trump card, the secret he had been hoarding for years, the leverage he genuinely believed would force me to surrender. He let out a dark, menacing sneer. His smile looked grotesque on his emaciated face. You are a cold, heartless bitch. Fine. If you want to play hardball, let's play. Let's do the math. Do you honestly think I don't know about that massive plot of ranch land your dead parents left you down in Texas? Andrew snarled, slamming his fist onto the glass conference table. That massive, supposedly worthless plot of dirt out in the middle of nowhere. You really thought I believed it was useless and forgot about it? Oh, I know the truth, Kate. I know that land was just successfully rezoned to build a multi-billion-dollar industrial tech park. The real estate value out there is exploding by the hour. Isn't just dirt anymore. Isn't a literal gold mine. Isn't worth hundreds of millions of dollars. I raised a single eyebrow not out of fear, but in sheer awe of his psychotic audacity. It turned out he had been secretly investigating my family's private assets for years, and even had inside information on commercial zoning laws. But I knew something he didn't. He kept ranting, his voice rising in triumphant hysteria. Your parents died without a formal will, making you the sole legal heir. But we are legally married in a community property state. Any massive increase in asset value during the marriage gets split right down the middle, 50-50. You want a clean, quiet divorce to protect your precious new reputation? Fine. Wire me exactly half the appraised value of that Texas land today, and I'll sign the papers. If you don't, I'll drag you into a brutal, decade-long legal war. I'll bleed you dry in court. Let's see how you manage your shiny new billionaire reputation while you are trapped in a vicious, public divorce scandal. I stared at him, feeling my stomach physically churn with disgust. He didn't just want to steal the money I had earned. He wanted to steal my dead parents' legacy, the sacred land where I grew up. He was perfectly willing to shred my family's memory just to save his own skin. Are you quite finished? I asked, my voice dropping to a glacial, terrifying whisper. Do you honestly think I didn't know the value of my own land? Do you think I'm so incredibly stupid that I would leave an opening for a parasite like you to blackmail me? I slowly pulled open the desk drawer, pulled out a thin red folder, and tossed it onto the glass in front of him. That is the certified chain of title. Read the bold print under the legal designation. That land is a sole and separate property gift, legally transferred into an irrevocable trust prior to our marriage. My father hired a team of estate lawyers to explicitly mandate that the land is an untouchable gift to his daughter, permanently shielded from any community property claims or spousal rights. You can sue me until your hair falls out, but you will never see a single, solitary cent of that money. I locked eyes with him, my gaze piercing straight through his skull. You spent your entire life plotting and scheming, but you forgot one critical detail. Men plan, but God laughs. Isn't almost as if my father looked into the future, saw your black, rotting soul, and built a legal fortress to protect me. You lost, Andrew. You have absolutely nothing. Andrew snatched the document off the table. His eyes bugged out of his head in sheer, unadulterated terror as he read the unbreakable legal clauses. His hands shook so violently the paper tore. The document slipped from his fingers and fluttered to the floor, just like his absolute last shred of hope. He stumbled backward, hyperventilating. No, this is impossible. Isn't a fake. His blinding greed had forced him to spend his entire life spinning a massive web of lies, only to realize at the very end that he was nothing more than a pathetic clown starring in his own tragic comedy. I pressed the intercom button on the desk. Security, escort him out. We are done here. The two massive guards immediately grabbed Andrew by the armpits and began dragging him violently toward the heavy doors. Andrew thrashed and kicked like a slaughtered pig. He had lost every last ounce of human dignity. His face turned dark purple with absolute rage and humiliation. He dug his fingernails into the doorframe, scraping the expensive mahogany and letting out a terrifying, guttural shriek. He screamed, spitting out the most insane, pathetic threats imaginable. "Don't smile yet, you bitch. Even if the land is yours, I'm still your legally wedded husband. I'll refuse to sign the divorce papers, and you will never be free. You want to go sleep with other billionaire men? Keep dreaming. I'll stalk you to the ends of the earth. I'll sue you for abandonment. I'll go to the press and tell them you deserted your family." I sat perfectly still in my chair, casually tapping my gold pen, watching him completely unravel like a psychiatric patient. Seeing that his violent threats weren't even causing me to blink, Andrew decided to attack what he thought was my deepest psychological wound. He let out a sick, malicious laugh and screamed with horrifying cruelty. "And don't forget one very important thing, Kate. You are a barren, broken woman. You failed to give this family a child. But now, I have a healthy, perfect son with Olivia. He is the sole heir to my legacy. You are so filthy rich. You have more money than God. Under state law, you are legally obligated to provide for your stepchild." Ian, my aggressively stoic lawyer who had been silently observing the entire meeting, instantly stood up, furious, preparing to physically throw Andrew out the window for such a vile insult. But I simply raised my hand, silencing Ian. I genuinely wanted to see exactly how deep into the gutter this man's sociopathy could go. Seeing Ian sit down, Andrew felt a surge of psychotic confidence. He spoke as if he were handing down a supreme legal judgment. "The fact that your womb is a barren wasteland is your greatest sin. Now, you are going to atone for that sin with cash. Every single month, you will wire Olivia $5,000 in child support, and you will surrender exactly half of your liquid assets to me. Agree to those terms, and I'll sign the divorce papers right now. Refuse, and I'll go on national television and tell the world that Catherine the billionaire is a barren, jealous psycho who hates innocent babies." I looked down at him. A massive wave of nausea hit me, but instead of screaming in anger, I threw my head back and laughed a dark, echoing, terrifying laugh. This monster, the man who had secretly crushed birth control pills into my drinks for a decade so I could never get pregnant, the man who had weaponized the trauma of my infertility to emotionally abuse me, was now arrogantly demanding I pay child support for his bastard son. He wasn't just cruel. His brain was so fundamentally broken and rotten that he was completely beyond saving. I stood up, walked slowly around the desk, stopped inches from his face, looked directly into his bloodshot, crazed eyes, and whispered softly, "Andrew, do you honestly believe you have any leverage left in this room? Do you think I'm still the submissive little housewife you can manipulate with your sick mind games?" The atmosphere in the room felt like a loaded gun pressed to his head. The only sounds were Andrew's heavy, panicked breathing and the ticking of the wall clock. I walked back to my desk and woke up my laptop. My fingers swiped across the trackpad, opening a highly encrypted audio file that I had saved as my nuclear option. It was a weapon I hated opening, because every time I listened to it, it physically hurt my chest. But dealing with a rabid dog like Andrew required lethal, undeniable force. "You want to sue me and stalk me for the rest of my life?" "Fine," I said, my voice dropping to sub-zero temperatures. "But before you get dragged out of this building to execute your little plan, I strongly suggest you listen to this. Listen very closely, and remember exactly who the hell you are." I hit play. A burst of static filled the room, followed immediately by the crystal-clear voices of two men. One was Andrew. The other was the sleazy, unlicensed mob lawyer he had hired 5 years ago when he first started plotting his fake European relocation. "Andrew, this is incredibly risky. Your wife is never going to voluntarily sign over the deeds to that Texas ranch. The deed is ironclad," the lawyer's voice echoed through the speakers. "What is risky about it? She is an obedient idiot. She signs whatever I put in front of her." Andrew's recorded voice laughed. It sounded demonic and utterly soulless. "If she refuses to transfer the deed, we just get rid of her. I already took out $1 million accidental death policy on her. All I have to do is slightly loosen the gas valve on the stove, or snip the brake lines before she drives over the Snoqualmie Pass. Boom! I get the $1 million insurance payout, and as her surviving husband, I automatically inherit the Texas land. I walk away with everything, move Olivia into the mansion, and live like a king." Andrew's face, which had been purple with rage seconds ago, instantly drained to the color of a fresh corpse. He froze entirely. His eyes bulged out of his skull, staring in sheer terror at the laptop speakers as if the devil himself had just crawled out of them. He could not comprehend how a highly classified, whispered conversation inside a private karaoke room had been recorded. It turned out that his sleazy lawyer, terrified that Andrew was going to murder him to tie up loose ends, had secretly recorded the conversation as an insurance policy. Max, my private investigator, had spent a small fortune tracking the lawyer down and buying the audio file. I slammed the spacebar, killing the audio. Andrew's recorded laughter abruptly stopped. A suffocating, terrifying silence filled the room. I stared at him with eyes that could cut glass. Did you hear that clearly? This isn't a simple divorce settlement, Andrew. This is a recorded confession of premeditated murder for financial gain. With this tape, the fraudulent insurance policy, and Dr. Evans's sworn testimony about you chemically poisoning your mother, what exactly do you think a federal judge is going to do to you? You won't get a single penny, but you will absolutely die in a concrete cell. Under the Slayer statute, your legal right to any inheritance or marital assets was permanently terminated the exact second you planned to murder me. Andrew began to violently shake. His knees completely gave out, and he collapsed flat onto the cold floor. He stammered, sweat pouring down his face like a waterfall. No, that is completely fake. I was drunk. I was just talking trash. I would never actually hurt you, Kate. I swear to God. His aggressive arrogance vanished, completely replaced by the frantic, whimpering panic of a man staring down a life sentence. While Andrew writhed on the floor, desperately trying to invent a defense for his felonies, the conference room doors swung open again. The bright hallway light outlined the silhouette of a severely emaciated, exhausted woman. It was Olivia. The girl who used to be a stunning, arrogant, pampered mistress now looked like a starving, beaten stray dog. Andrew snapped his head up, saw Olivia, and a microscopic flash of delusional hope lit up his eyes. He scrambled to his knees, trying to crawl toward her. Olivia, you came. Tell them. Tell her how much we love each other. Tell her I'm a good man who never wanted to hurt anyone. Please. You have to save me. But Olivia did not run into his arms. She physically recoiled in disgust, shrinking back behind one of the massive security guards. Her eyes held absolutely zero love, zero warmth, only sheer, unadulterated terror and white-hot hatred. I gave her a curt nod. Olivia took a massive, shuddering breath, gathered every ounce of courage she had left, and stepped into the room, keeping a wide, safe distance from Andrew. With violently shaking hands, she unzipped her cheap canvas tote bag, pulled out a stack of crumpled police reports, and slammed them onto Ian's desk. Her voice cracked, but her words were razor-sharp. I'm here to testify. I'm officially pressing federal charges against Andrew for wire fraud, domestic battery, and extortion. He didn't just run a scam on you, Catherine. He ran a massive scam on me. Olivia slowly turned to face Andrew. Tears of pure fury streamed down her face. You swore to me you loved me. You swore you were going to give me and my son a billionaire lifestyle. But the truth is, you only saw me as an incubator, a cheap tool to steal money. Catherine sent me a copy of the accidental death policy you secretly took out on my life. Did you plan on murdering me, too? Huh? If I hemorrhaged and died on the delivery table, you would have scooped up $500,000 in cash and raised my son as your prop. You are a literal psychopath. Andrew was completely stunned. He never in a million years expected that his absolute final lifeline, the woman he assumed was completely under his control, would walk into the room and put a bullet in his head. He screamed, his face turning an apocalyptic shade of red. The veins in his neck looked ready to burst. You stupid bitch! You believed this old hag and betrayed me? I paid for your penthouse. I bought you designer bags. And now you dare bite the hand that fed you? You ungrateful whore. He violently lunged at Olivia, but the security guards instantly tackled him, twisting his arms painfully behind his back and slamming him into a chair. Olivia broke down sobbing, aggressively pulling up her sleeves to reveal horrific, dark purple bruises up and down her arms. You fed me? You beat me. Every single time your crypto trades crashed, every single time you got drunk, you used me as a punching bag. I only stayed because I was terrified for my baby's life. But once I found out you actively planned to murder me for insurance money, I went straight to the police. Catherine opened my eyes. She gave me the money to escape your abuse. I watched this chaotic, violent implosion without a single trace of emotion. Two women, the legal wife and the secret mistress, women who society dictates should be tearing each other's hair out, were now standing shoulder to shoulder, entirely dismantling the life of a sociopath. We weren't united by friendship, but by shared trauma, and a massive, belated awakening to the presence of pure evil. Pinned to the chair, utterly exposed, and violently betrayed by his own mistress, Andrew completely snapped. His brain broke. He sat there hyperventilating, foaming at the mouth like a rabid dog. His bloodshot eyes darted wildly around the glass walls, desperately searching for an escape route. But the room was completely locked down, and every single person was staring at him like he was a monster. The absolute humiliation, the blinding hatred, and the crushing despair violently collided inside his head, sparking a massive, psychotic break. Suddenly, Andrew began to laugh. It was a high-pitched, demonic, hysterical cackle that sent a freezing chill down the spine of everyone in the room. He violently wrenched his hand free from the guard's grip and plunged it deep into the pocket of his oversized jacket, where he had been hiding something since he walked into the building. "You want to see me rot in a cell? Huh? You two bitches teamed up to destroy my life?" he roared. His voice was completely unrecognizable, sounding like a demon gargling glass. "Fine. If I lose everything, then neither of you gets to walk out of this room alive. I'm dragging both of you straight to hell with me." In a blindingly fast motion, he ripped a standard plastic water bottle out of his coat. But it wasn't filled with water. It was filled with a dark yellow liquid. He violently bit the cap off, whipped his arm in a massive arc, and a deeply toxic, overwhelming stench of raw gasoline exploded into the room. The fuel splashed all over the mahogany desk, soaked the binders of evidence, and splattered across my suit and Olivia's dress. Olivia let out a blood-curdling scream and threw herself onto the floor in the corner of the room. Ian instantly leaped over the desk, violently shoving me behind his body, and screamed at the top of his lungs. "Andrew, you are out of your psychotic mind. Drop it right now. Do you want to burn alive? Drop it." But Andrew had gone completely deaf to reality. The only thing left in his eyes was absolute, apocalyptic destruction. He pulled a cheap red Bic lighter out of his pocket. His thumb trembled violently on the metal spark wheel, but his eyes were locked onto mine with lethal intent. "Get back," he shrieked. Tears and snot poured uncontrollably down his emaciated, lunatic face. "I lost everything. My company, my mansion, my money. The feds are going to lock me in a cage until I die. What is the point of living? I'm going to burn it all down. Burn it all to ash. Let's see you play the billionaire queen when your face is melted off, Kate." The tiny spark from the flint ignited, and a small flame danced on the tip of the lighter, waving in front of my eyes like a mocking demon. The suffocating fumes of the gasoline grew heavier by the second. My lungs burned, and my chest felt like it was in a vice. But as I stared at him, I didn't feel the icy grip of the fear of death. I only felt a bottomless, overwhelming pity. When a human soul is entirely consumed by greed and hatred, they turn themselves into a human torch, burning their own life down and trying to take everyone else with them. But before the tiny flame on the red lighter could ignite the fumes, the heavy glass doors to the conference room were violently kicked off their hinges. A tactical squad of undercover federal agents, whom Ian had legally stationed in the adjacent office just in case, stormed into the room like a localized hurricane. A sharp, brutal crack echoed through the air. An agent's steel baton brutally smashed into Andrew's wrist, instantly shattering the bone. The lighter flew across the room and extinguished harmlessly under a leather sofa. Two massive federal agents instantly tackled Andrew, slamming his face brutally into the gasoline-soaked carpet, wrenching his broken arm behind his back as he unleashed a series of horrifying, animalistic shrieks. The toxic, suffocating stench of gasoline completely mixed with the sharp smell of sweat, adrenaline, and pure terror. I remained sitting perfectly upright in my chair, gripping the armrest so intensely my fingernails nearly drew blood. My eyes were entirely locked onto the man being crushed into the floor. Andrew's face was hideously contorted in agonizing physical pain and absolute humiliation. He violently wrenched his neck, trying to look up at me. His bloodshot, psychotic eyes no longer held any aggression. They were entirely filled with pathetic, sniveling desperation. The heavy steel handcuffs ratcheted shut, cold and merciless, permanently locking away the hands that had once placed a wedding ring on my finger, the hands that had forged documents to destroy my life. "Andrew, you are under arrest for attempted murder, federal wire fraud, extortion, and interstate racketeering. You have the right to remain silent. Anything you say can and will be used against you in a court of law." The lead FBI agent's voice boomed through the room, sounding exactly like the heavy slam of a judge's gavel permanently ending Andrew's freedom. They dragged him to his feet by his collar and began hauling him out the door. As they dragged him past my chair, his legs suddenly gave out. He collapsed to his knees, burying his bleeding face in my skirt. Tears, blood, and snot smeared across my clothes. Kate, please. I'm begging you. Save me. Tell them I was just having a breakdown. Tell them I wasn't actually going to spark the lighter. We were married for 12 years. Are you really going to stand there and watch me die in a federal prison? I'm sorry. I swear to God I'll go to rehab. I'll be a better man. Tell them to let me go, he wailed in absolute agony. His crying and begging sounded incredibly pathetic, but to me, they were just crocodile tears, the ultimate cowardice of a sociopath who absolutely refused to face the consequences of his own evil. He wasn't crying because he felt guilt. He was crying because he was terrified of being locked in a cage. I slowly stood up, smoothed out my gasoline-stained designer jacket, stepped back to avoid his touch, and stared down into his weeping eyes. I spoke in a voice entirely devoid of human emotion. Our marriage officially died the night you forced a doctor to poison your own mother's milk. It was buried the day you bought an accidental death policy on my life. You wouldn't have sparked it? If Ian hadn't tackled me, we would all be charred corpses right now. Have fun in federal lockdown. Consider this my final lesson to you on the absolute reality of karma. The agents violently yanked Andrew up and dragged him away. His pathetic, screaming silhouette disappeared behind the closing elevator doors. Olivia was sitting in the corner, her face buried in her knees, sobbing uncontrollably from a mix of sheer terror and massive relief. A week after the FBI raided Andrew's motel and officially booked him, I received a call from the state-funded nursing home notifying me that Martha had suffered a catastrophic secondary stroke. Even though I had sworn to completely sever all ties with that bloodline, the nagging memory of the 12 years I had called her mom compelled me to visit her one absolute final time. The state facility on the edge of the city was wrapped in a freezing, depressing drizzle. I walked down the long, flickering, fluorescent-lit hallway. The overwhelming stench of bleach, urine, and death hit the back of my throat, making my chest tighten. Martha was lying curled up in the fetal position on a rusty hospital bed. Her skeletal, bruised arms were covered in IV needles and medical tape. Hearing my high heels click against the linoleum, she struggled to force her eyes open. Her cloudy, jaundiced eyes, which had spent 12 years looking at me with pure disgust and judgment, now held nothing but absolute, crushing terror and isolation. She had already been informed by a state social worker that her precious Andrew was facing life in federal prison. That psychological nuclear bomb was the final blow that shattered her remaining will to live. Seeing me, she desperately tried to prop herself up. Her violently shaking, skeletal hand reached out toward me, but instantly recoiled in deep shame. Her voice was a barely audible, rattling wheeze. Kate, you actually came? I was certain you hated our guts and would let me rot here without a second thought. I pulled up a cheap plastic chair next to her bed. I didn't reach out to hold her hand. I simply placed a small paper bag of fresh oranges on her nightstand. I only came here to clear your outstanding medical debts with the state, and to say a final goodbye. I'm flying back to New York tomorrow, and I'll never return to this city. Try to eat something. The state doctors say if you cooperate with the physical therapy, you might survive a few more years. Martha slowly shook her head against the thin pillow. Thick, cloudy tears rolled out of the deep wrinkles around her eyes. I don't have much time left. This is God's punishment for the absolute evil our family committed. I'm so incredibly sorry, Kate. I ruined your life. She suddenly lunged forward, weakly grabbing the sleeve of my coat. Her breathing became frantic, her voice tight and desperate. Sweet girl, do you know why you could never get pregnant all those years? It wasn't your body failing you. It was me. It was all my fault. My fault? I completely froze. My heart skipped a massive beat, and an arctic chill raced down my spine. Martha began to sob violently, finally confessing the horrifying, demonic secret she had kept buried for 10 years. A decade ago, I went to a psychic in the city, and she read your aura. She swore to me that you were carrying a dark, lethal curse. She told me that if you ever gave birth to Andrew's child, the curse would transfer to my son, and he would die a violently bloody death before he turned 40. I was so terrified of losing my only boy. So every single morning, when I made your tea, I secretly crushed up heavy doses of birth control pills and stirred them into your mug. I poisoned you for 10 years. Please forgive me. I was just so scared. The floor literally dropped out from under me. It turned out that my decade of agonizing mental torture The endless nights I spent crying because I felt like a broken, useless woman. The thousands of dollars I spent on fertility specialists, all of it was artificially orchestrated by this psychotic old woman. Because of a cheap parlor trick, because of her blinding, selfish obsession with her son, she had actively stolen my fundamental right to be a mother, publicly humiliating me as a barren tree while secretly drugging my morning tea. I stared down at her. Any lingering trace of human pity instantly evaporated, leaving behind nothing but pure, violently white-hot hatred and agonizing heartbreak. I shot up from the plastic chair, violently yanking my sleeve out of her grip as if she were coated in acid. I wanted to scream, to flip the hospital bed, to wrap my hands around her throat. But looking at her rotting, emaciated body, I realized that screaming was entirely pointless. The absolute worst punishment I could inflict wasn't violence. It was leaving her completely alone in this sterile room, to slowly suffocate on her own guilt and terror. I took a massive, shuddering breath, physically swallowing my tears, and spoke in a voice colder than liquid nitrogen. Don't flatter yourself. I'm not going to waste my time suing a dying woman. I'm going to let you lay in this bed and rot, fully awake, tormented by the demons you created. The cash I left at the front desk is my final act of charity. Burn in hell, Martha. I turned on my heel and marched out of the room, completely ignoring her pathetic, desperate wailing that echoed down the hallway, slowly fading into the sound of the rain beating against the windows. The morning of the federal sentencing, the sky over Seattle was completely cloudless and bright. I sat in the front row of the federal courtroom, wearing a flawless, tailored white dress. My heart was as calm and still as a frozen lake. Andrew stood at the defense table, his head hanging low. His hair had been buzzed off. The oversized, bright orange federal prison jumpsuit made him look incredibly small and pathetic. He didn't dare lift his eyes to look at anyone in the gallery, not even Olivia, who was sitting on the witness bench, her eyes swollen shut from crying. The federal judge read the sentencing mandate in a booming, monotonous voice, listing off the mountain of felonies Andrew had committed: aggravated wire fraud, identity theft, interstate embezzlement, assault, and the most severe charge, conspiracy to commit first-degree murder for financial gain. Every single charge read aloud was like a massive iron nail being hammered into the coffin of his life. Olivia had taken a plea deal, turning state's evidence and providing the FBI with all of Andrew's threatening text messages and hidden ledgers, which allowed the federal prosecutors to completely obliterate his defense. The defendant, Andrew, acting out of extreme, premeditated malice and financial greed, actively conspired to terminate the life of his spouse. This court sentences the defendant to 25 years in a maximum security federal penitentiary, without the possibility of early parole. The heavy crack of the judge's wooden gavel echoed like a gunshot, permanently ending the life of a greedy, psychotic parasite. Andrew physically collapsed. 2 armed U.S. Marshals had to haul him up by his armpits just to keep him standing. He slowly turned his head. His dead, hollow eyes met mine for the absolute last time. They were overflowing with begging, regret, and apocalyptic despair. But I simply stared through him, as if he didn't exist. Court was dismissed. I walked out onto the courthouse steps, feeling the warm summer sun hit my face. Olivia ran up behind me, clutching her toddler to her chest. She hesitated, then called out nervously, "Catherine, please. I know my apologies mean absolutely nothing to you, but I'm so deeply, truly sorry. I'm taking the baby and moving back to my mom's farm in the Midwest. I'm going to work in the dirt, sell vegetables, do whatever it takes to raise him far, far away from this toxic city." I looked at the exhausted young girl, a victim of her own greed, but mostly a victim of a master manipulator, and gave a slow, quiet nod. "Go. Start completely over. The baby is innocent. Raise him to be a good man, so he doesn't grow up to be the monster his father was." I reached into my designer purse and handed Olivia a thick envelope of cash. It wasn't millions, but it was more than enough to buy a used car, drive back to the Midwest, and put food on the table for a year. Olivia broke down in tears, bowed her head in deep gratitude, and walked away. Watching her silhouette fade into the busy downtown crowd, I felt a massive, crushing weight physically lift off my chest. All the betrayals, the white-hot hatred, the psychotic lies, and the 12 years of absolute agony were packed into a box and permanently buried inside the concrete walls of that courthouse. Ian walked out the glass doors, smiling warmly, and handed me a manila envelope containing my finalized, federally stamped divorce decree. "Congratulations, Kate. You are completely, 100%, legally free." From this second on, you are Catherine, a fiercely independent, untouchable woman. I took the thin, incredibly heavy document. The corners of my mouth curled into a genuine, radiant smile. This wasn't just the legal termination of a nightmare marriage. It was a golden ticket to a brand new universe. A world where I would live exclusively for myself, unapologetically and brilliantly. The very first morning of my new life, I woke up while the massive city was still wrapped in a soft dawn mist. I stepped out onto the glass balcony of my ultra-luxury penthouse in Manhattan, holding a steaming mug of herbal tea. I took a massive, deep breath of the crisp morning air. Far below me, the Hudson River slowly snaked its way toward the ocean. The surface of the water glittered like crushed diamonds under the rising sun. Massive cargo ships drifted silently, their deep horns echoing peacefully across the skyline. I thought back to a decade ago, standing on a different waterfront, when I was just a naive, foolish girl who genuinely believed that blind self-sacrifice was the key to eternal love. I had burned the best years of my youth to the ground to build an empire for a monster, and my reward was a knife in the back. But standing here today, looking out over the greatest city on earth, I didn't feel a single ounce of pain or anger. That agony had scarred over. It was just an old war wound. It reminded me to stay sharp, but it no longer bled, and it no longer hurt. On the glass patio table, my phone vibrated with an urgent email notification. It was an exclusive, highly coveted invitation from the International Arts Syndicate, formally asking me to headline a solo art exhibition at the Louvre in Paris next month. My massive collection of oil paintings, titled Resurrection Canvases I had aggressively painted using my tears and rage during my darkest, most isolated nights, had completely captivated the global art board. This wasn't just the art world recognizing my talent. It was a massive set of golden doors, swinging wide open, welcoming me into a reality where I could live out the burning passion I had suppressed for 12 years under the suffocating weight of domestic slavery. I took a slow sip of my tea. The sweet, herbal warmth flooded my senses. I stared out at the New York horizon, where a blazing crimson sun was violently tearing through the last of the gray clouds. Life, much like the river below, is full of brutal currents and terrifying drops. But eventually, if you fight hard enough, it dumps you out into a limitless, beautiful ocean. I honestly thought I had lost my entire world, but it turned out that by violently cutting out the cancer that was holding me down, I had conquered a brand new one. I walked back inside the penthouse and began packing my Louis Vuitton trunks for my flight to France. This time, I wasn't packing a single bag in the dead of night to flee a murderer. I was packing for a global tour fueled by absolute pride and limitless hope. I would carry the memories of the darkest thunderstorms with me, only so I would know exactly how much to appreciate the blinding sunlight. There will probably be more brutal challenges in my future. Maybe I'll risk falling in love again, or maybe I'll choose the absolute peace of standing at the top of the mountain alone. But none of that matters right now. The only thing that matters is that I finally found myself a woman who fiercely loves her own soul, and who will never, ever bow her head to anyone again. The sun fully crested the skyline, and my new life officially began at this exact second.